right, good evening. As we all make our way to our seats, let's all stand together. Hymn number 28, Great is Thy Faithfulness. Hymn number 28, let's sing all three verses together. I know it's the middle of the week. We're all a little bit tired. But aren't you glad that God is faithful to us? He blesses us each and every single day. Let's sing out on that second verse. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Omar, open us in prayer tonight. Go ahead and be seated. We've got several people out tonight, and Harold Debbie just had to leave because Harold's hurting in his back and not feeling good. And so just pray for him. He's got some aches and pains, and I want to pray for him. Gabe and Lorna are on their way back from Fresno. She had a stress test today. I want to pray for her. And Brother David had a stress test today as well. Anybody want one tomorrow? And so, no, those are no fun. And so, let's pray for these about this situation. And several, and Fernando and them are out tonight because his back's hurting. And so, I don't know if it's the great change of weather that's getting ready to happen, because it is going to be a major difference in temperature from today till tomorrow. But maybe that plays a part too. But just pray for these that are not feeling well. Pray for others that are not here tonight. And you look around and encourage and text people, call them, and invite them, encourage them back to be back in our services on Sunday. Today is the cutoff day, the last day. We're going to collect those sheets for the shirt orders. So if you want to order a shirt, today is the day to do that. So you need to mark that form out there. Even you don't have to pay for it today, but we need to know if you want one. So we need to get that ordered tomorrow. The sale runs out at the end of this week, and so want to get those ordered before that happens. So please do that today. Got our prophecy conference coming up here in just a couple of weeks. Brother Woodley's going to be with us. And so you be inviting people. We've got cards for you to invite people and use. And then Saturday, we're going to be going out on outreach, trying to get some of those invitation cards out, as well as some of our regular cards that we use for invitations out as well. So you come be with us Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. A little before then, we'll pray. we'll get prepared and go out and get some good exercise and get those cards out. And we invite you to do that. You don't have to talk to anybody. If you run into anybody, we'll have you with somebody who's more used to dealing with people and doing this kind of thing. So we won't put you alone, but we encourage you to come and help us get those out so that we can get the word out about our prophecy conference. I think that's all the announcements I've got except for birthdays. It's the first evening service of the month, and so we want to recognize those April birthdays. Don't have as many April birthdays as we had in March, but we've got some, and we don't want to leave them out because they're important people, right? Oh, I guess the people that were born in April don't think so. And so we want to recognize them. All right, we've got Ricky Perales, got a birthday on April 7th. Maddie Rasnick's got a birthday on April 11th. Kyrene, you pray for Vince and Catherine and their family. They've gone to see that big hole in the ground in Arizona. And they'll be coming back at the end of this week. But Kyrene's got a birthday on the 17th. Fernando's got a birthday on the 24th. Marcos got a birthday on the 25th. He'll be 25 on the 25. 26 on the 25. Okay. And then Renee has got a birthday on the 30th, and he's in Washington State, up there at Fort Lewis. This is where he's at. But you remember him on his birthday. Did we miss anybody? Anybody else got an April birthday? Did anybody get married in April? John and Gloria got married in April. What day? 22nd. So that made it easy. Your birthday's on the 22nd, and your marriage was on the 22nd. That makes it easy. Anybody else get married in April? All right, well, happy anniversary to you guys. Let's sing happy birthday to these that have a birthday this month. Sing with me. Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, God bless you. Happy birthday to you. And you and you. All right, Brother David's going to come back up here. We're going to sing our fellowship song. Let's get turn to page number 9 or stand and sing and look on the screen, but sing out and we'll fellowship with each other after we sing that first verse.
Just linking up, making sure we were doing this right. Hymn number 9, God Can Do Anything. God can do anything, anything, anything. God can do anything but fail. He's the Alpha and Omega, beginning and the end. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. God can do anything, anything. make our way back to our seat, we'll do that first verse, second verse, and then the chorus. God can do anything, anything, anything. God can do anything but fail. He can save, He can keep, He can cleanse, and He will. God can do anything but fail. He's the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. God can do anything, anything, anything. God can do anything but fail. You may be seated.
Thank you, Brother Radzick, for that. Let's go ahead and grab our Bibles tonight. We're going to jump right in because we want to finish this chapter tonight. And there's a lot to cover here in chapter number 5. We started last week looking at this chapter. And where we picked up at this chapter is after 3 days of fasting, Esther has now made her move in attempting to save the Jewish people from certain death. She has taken a huge risk in appearing before the king without an invitation. Such a risk could go really, really wrong. It could end in her death. But thankfully it did not end that way. Instead of being irritated or aggravated by Esther's appearance before him, the king was actually delighted that she came to see him. And he was also not only delighted, but I think he was sensitive to the fact that for Esther to make this bold of a move, she had to want something pretty badly to make this risky move. And so, because of his delight in her appearance, he has offered her to grant her request, whatever that request may be. And we looked last week and we thought about that, and we thought, wow, this is an opportune time for her to request his help in saving the Jewish people. But of course, that's not how it worked out. She did not ask for his help in delivering the Jewish people. She instead invited the king to a party, to a banquet that she was putting together. And she wanted the king to come with just one other person. She wanted him to come with Haman, and that's it. And so Esther's proposal, we finished last week, that was not coming from trepidation or fear, but it was coming from prudence. She was using some wisdom here, slowly but wisely. Esther is working her way up to asking the king to help deliver the Jewish people. So we're going to look kind of at the second part of Esther's plan. Obviously, she had this all planned out. She did not go and ask the king to come to a party without preparation, but she had already prepared and had in mind what she was going to do before she went before the king. She knew this was what she was going to request of him, and so she did so. So we want to see the plan in the petition tonight. This banquet was not thrown together at the last minute, but it was deliberately prepared as a part of Esther's grand plan to help save the Jewish people. We considered last week that Esther knew what she was asking the king would require some big things of him. It would require that he, at least in some regard, admit that he had made a mistake. He had at least made a mistake in judgment in entrusting Haman with authority and power to issue such a decree. He could throw Haman under the bus, and it was all Haman's fault. It was all Haman's doing. But the king had given him that authority, that power. So at the very least, the king was going to have to admit, I made a very serious error in judgment, in character, in judging somebody's character. And so he was at least going to have to admit that, and that's asking a lot from an absolute monarch. We have politicians today that are not absolute monarchs, but rarely will you ever get any of them to admit a mistake. And so asking an absolute monarch to admit he made a mistake is going to be a big ask. Second of all, it's going to be costly. It was going to cost him his chief advisor and counselor, a man who he leaned upon and looked to and entrusted with great power in his kingdom. And then it was going to cost him a lot of money, because Haman had bribed the king to do this and had promised the king that he would give him a large, large sum of money in order to fulfill this plan of carrying out the death sentence on the Jew. All of that is going to be a big, big pill for the king to swallow. Esther knows that. That's why she wants to make sure that she does this exactly the right way. So she starts by asking him and inviting him to come to this banquet, trying to soften him up. And we talked about that a little bit last time. But I want you to see the request again in verse number 4. Chapter 5, verse number 4. And Esther answered, "If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him." Now, I know we covered this last week, but I did want to mention this. Notice, Esther says, if it seemed good unto the king. Her request was not a demand. You know, sometimes people request us to do things, but we know it's not really a request. It's more of an expectation. It's more of a command that we do those certain things. This was truly a request. She knew she had no authority, no pull, no power to demand or expect the king to do this, that he would make a choice and decision of his own will whether he would follow through with this or not. This choice would be entirely up to the king. By the way, you and I, when we pray and make our petitions and requests known unto the Lord, should have the same attitude. It is of the Lord's will. You cannot force your will on God. You must accept and learn to accept God's will when you pray about things. God is wiser than you, smarter than you, more knowledgeable than you. He knows what is best for us. So when you and I pray, we need to come with the same attitude and the same humility that Esther approached King Ahasuerus. One of, I'm just requesting this. I'm not demanding this. Now that's very different. I want to say, we all probably have charismatic people that we know or in our family, but many charismatic people have kind of a name it and claim it attitude. They look at God as like a genie in a bottle, that you can rub that bottle and get him to come out in prayer, and you can command him to do things. In fact, many of them teach you that that's what you're supposed to do. You've got to command God to do these things. They may think that works, but I don't. I think that's pretty foolish behavior that is more likely to come back on you the wrong way than to ever be beneficial to you. I would suggest you come more like Esther came, and come with an humble, submissive attitude. If this is your will, God, please do something. Her trust, I won't say this about Esther doing this. The world would say, well, Esther, you're just leaving things to chance, or you're leaving things to fate. You should expect the king, or you should command the king, or demand the king. I don't think she's leaving it up to chance or fate. I think she's leaving it up to faith. I think Esther believed that God could do great things, that God could get the king to do what she wanted and needed him to do. She is trusting not in the king, she's trusting in God, and she is demonstrating this by her faith, by letting God do what she can. She can't make the king want to come to this. She can't make the king be agreeable to any of this. She can't make the king be accepting of the later request, the real reason that she's asking. She can't make the king do any of that. But she's willing to trust that God can. And folks, you and I need to trust the same way. Her trust was not in circumstances. Her trust was in the God who overrules circumstances. She could not make the king happy to see her, nor could she make him accept her invitation, but she knew somebody who could. Next time you get aggravated with somebody, remember, you can't change them. But you know somebody who can. Next time you have a great need in your life, and you say, God, I really need a job. I really need somebody to... Isn't it frustrating when you're trying to find a job and you go interview and they say, well, you need experience. And how are you ever supposed to get experience if nobody will hire you? That's just frustrating. And what you should do is say, God, I need you to work in somebody's heart to give me an opportunity, to open a door that I can go through. Do you know there's a God that can do that? And you just need to trust in Him, and you need to ask Him these things and then rely upon Him, because she knew somebody who could move the heart of the king. And that's who she was trusting in, not in the king. Notice not only the request and the plan, but again, look at the response. Verse number 5. Then the king said, cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther had said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. The king's response, if there was any doubt as to the way this invitation was going to go, it was quickly resolved. The king showed an eagerness, showed an excitement to accept Esther's invitation. He told his servants, you go tell Haman, get ready and get to Esther's house. Make haste. Hurry up. I don't want to be waiting on you. As we see from the beginning of this book, Esther's invitation was playing right into those things that delighted the king. This king, we can read in chapter number 1, this king loved eating, he loved drinking, and he loved beautiful women. We see that in the first 2 chapters. Esther's playing right into those things that appeal to the king. Esther was his wife, and she had his number. She knew what he liked. And she was setting him up because she knew that. The Hebrew word translated banquet here in verse number 4, and to the banquet that I have prepared for him. That word, banquet, is the same word that you find in chapter 1 that's translated feast. It's the same Hebrew word. So why is one called a feast and one sounds like a nice little tea party? Well, the setting for one, the number of people for the other. The reason one is called a feast and the other is a banquet is due to those 2 things. And we have no doubt that Esther's private little party, though it wasn't going to last 6 months like the king's feast did, and I'm sure did not cost nearly as much, I have no doubt Esther pulled out all the stops. She had things elaborately decorated. She probably had prepared a very exquisite dinner for the king to eat. And she would do those things which would be fitting for a king. As I think about that, I think about this fact, folks. You know, Satan knows our weaknesses. And Satan knows how to exploit your weaknesses. He's had his emissaries watching you all your life. Satan has at his disposal a vast army of unseen demons. And all your life, they've been watching and observing you. They know your every weakness. They know what tempts you, how to lead you astray. But you know, there's somebody else that knows those things too. Satan surely knows those things, but God knows those things too. And you know, God can use those same weaknesses of fallen men to further His providential plans. You know, God is so wise, He can carry out His plan and He can get the devil to pay for it. He can. That's how wise God is. God is so wise that He can get Haman to build the gallows from which Haman is going to die on. That's how wise God is. God is so wise that He can take care of you and I, and He can get the world and He can get the devil to pay for it. So God knows those weaknesses as well. This king had a weakness for a party. He liked to party. You probably know some people like that. He did not want to be late to this party, and he would not tolerate Haman making him late. So he sends word, you make haste. Unlike the king, Haman's attendance was not by choice, but by command. I'm sure he didn't mind, as we'll see later. But he really didn't have a choice in the matter. The king told him to come. He was going to come. So the king and Haman attended this party that Esther had prepared to use as an occasion to appeal to the king on behalf of the Jews. But notice the third thing here about the plan. The repetition in the plan. There's kind of some odd things that happen here. There's a repetition on both on the part of the king and on the part of Esther. Look at verse number 6. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. This is very similar, almost word for word, a repetition of the king's earlier proposal to Esther when she appeared in his throne room. He is making the same proposal again. He knows she has went to all of this trouble and all of this risk because she desperately wants something. Because she is a woman who has a great need in her life. And the king's repeating of his proposal shows that Esther's party had not put him off. It had actually pleased him. And that he was just as inclined, if not more so, to give her what she desired. You know what it shows? Esther's plan is working. The king is intrigued. He's flattered. He's desirous to do something to show his pleasure in the queen. Surely, this is the right time for Esther to reveal what she really wants. Surely, this is the opportune moment for her to talk about deliverance of the Jews. As much as the king loved the party, he knew this party was not for nothing. It was a party with a purpose. This king had no doubt been wined and dined by many people over his years. And he knew that people who did so always did so because they wanted something of him. This no doubt piqued his curiosity. It intrigued him. What is it that she wants? What is it that she's going to ask me? So if you'll buy me a ribeye, it'll intrigue me. I want to know what you really want too. And so when your wife fixes you that tomorrow night, you're going to be intrigued. What is she going to honey, I want to invite you to a nice dinner tonight. You're going to say, okay, what is she wanting? She's wanting a new dress? She's wanting a new car? What is it she's going to want? Well, he was intrigued. He knew she wanted something. He just didn't know what it was. So we see the proposal repeated. Second of all, we see the party repeated. Lo and behold, what comes out of Esther's mouth is a complete shock and surprise. If Hollywood was writing this, they would have never came up with this plot line, because they would have considered it boring. Because Esther says, here's what I want. I'm going to have another party tomorrow, and I want you to come to that. I thought we were just on this merry-go-round. And here we go again. Look at verse number 7. Then answered Esther and said, my petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king had said. So, here's my request. Here's my petition. I'm going to have another banquet tomorrow, and I want you to come to that. Nobody was expecting that. Not the king, not Haman. It even surprises us, the reader, doesn't it? You read that, and on the surface, the casual reader of the Bible would look at that and think, well, she's fearful. She's trying to work up her courage. She's trying to summon the strength to ask the king what she really wants to ask him. But I believe there's more to it than that. We'll look at that in just a moment. But Esther's request for the king is repeated just like her previous request. So we have a repetition of the proposal by the king, and we have a repetition of the party invitation by the queen. What's going on here? Well, let's look at why I say there's more to it than just Esther trying to summon the courage to ask the king what she really wanted to ask. Notice the prudence in the petition. I don't believe for a moment that it was fear that was driving Esther's actions here. I believe it was wisdom, what we would call prudence. Oh, don't get me wrong, folks. I'm sure she was afraid. I absolutely believe she's fearful. Who wouldn't be? Anybody in their right mind would be fearful. Her request is going to be difficult. It's going to be dangerous. It could result in sudden death for her and a certain death sentence for the Jewish people. But I don't think she's just trying to summon her courage here. She's using wisdom in what she's doing. There's 4 things real quick about the prudence in the petition. Notice, first of all, the politeness in the petition. I want you to notice her words there again in verse number 8. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request. I mean, she is going over and beyond to let the king know this is all your decision. I'm not expecting or demanding anything from you. I want you to know this is all your choice. I'm asking you, I'm politely requesting this, but I'm not demanding that you do anything. You know, Esther had learned you get more flies with honey than you do vinegar. Her second invitation was just as polite, if not more so, than her first invitation. Now, let's think about this for a moment. Esther's walking a tightrope here. If she drags this thing out too much, King's going to get irritated. He's no fool. He doesn't like to be played around with. She keeps putting this thing off too long. He doesn't care what her request's going to be. It's going to be bad on her end. So she's walking a fine, fine line here. And putting off this for another day, she's got to be very polite in the way that she does this. Politeness would be required to not anger the king by putting off his proposal. Esther's politeness is seen again here in not demanding the king's presence, but in graciously asking for it. And in so doing, she shows him a great deal of respect. And folks, if you want people to do things for you, you better be polite and you better show respect. Don't expect people to be gracious and kind to you if you don't show them politeness and respect. And just yesterday, I had filled up my green can. I'm taking up a little bit of my yard to expand my patio a little bit. And so I've been filling up little by little my green can with some sod that I've been taking up over the last week. And yesterday, Dawn and I, right before lunch, went out for a walk, and I came back and looked, and my green can was still full and my neighbor's was empty. I was like, oh, man, this is just going to delay me. I saw the garbage man had finished his route and was coming right up the street. So I flagged him down. And I said, hey, was it too heavy? He said, yeah, it was. I started getting it about halfway up, and it was too heavy. I said, okay, well, I just don't have any way to weigh that, so I don't know how much it weighs. I don't know if it's too much or not. I'll take some out, and we'll get it next week. You know, some people would go over there and chew the guy out. That guy's going to collect my garbage every week. I don't want him to just toss my can halfway across the driveway. I don't want him to conveniently forget to get my garbage every week. We got to deal with people in this world. And so you got to be polite to people in this world. We have such a rude, selfish society that everybody is only looking out for themselves. They don't care how they treat anybody. That shouldn't be the way anybody behaves, but certainly not the way a Christian behaves. Disrespect, by the way, here's another lesson on prayer. When you pray, you need to be respectful to God. Because disrespect will not help your prayers, but hinder them. Her politeness shows her prudence in this matter. She's going to ask some big things. She's going to be definitely polite and respectful by the way she does it. Notice, second of all, we see her prudence not only in her politeness, but also in her patience. Sometimes we just want to rip the Band-Aid off. Don't we? I mean, those things that we don't like to do, we just want to get them over and done with, regardless of the outcome. Just do it. This was not a time to just do it. This was going to be a very difficult thing that she needed God's help with, and she needed God to be working before she made this request. And she was willing to wait, as difficult as it may be. Since she's learned this 3 days ago, I guarantee you she's not had a good night's sleep. Since 3 days ago that Mordecai put her in the corner and said, God has put you here for such a time as this. There is nobody else to help save the people. If you refuse to do this, God will remove you and replace you with somebody else. And she knew she had to do something. I guarantee you Esther's not got a good night's sleep. And if she was like most people, she said, let's just get this over with. One way or another, if I perish, I perish. She's going to go another night. She's going to go another day with all this weighing on her. But it shows patience. It shows that she is willing to wait on God. We just talked about in our discipleship time, that's the most challenging thing in life to do. Don't confuse patience with procrastination. They're not the same. She's already shown great courage in appearing before the king. She's got the lives of a whole group of people, a whole nation of people that are in her hands. She's just not going to act hastily or rashly. She's going to wait until the right time. She waited 3 days already. She could wait one more. She wasn't doing so because she was lazy, hesitant, or fearful. But I think she was waiting on the Lord to confirm in her heart and give her peace about the situation. And by the way, there's great wisdom in that. Until you have peace, don't make any rash or hasty decisions. Just wait. You know, I found as I grow older, if I wait, a lot of problems resolve themselves. They do. When I could have taken action and probably would have made things worse, by waiting on the Lord, He took care of the problem for me. That's not being fearful. That's not being hesitant. That's not being a procrastinator. There's a difference between the two. But we need patience. And she displayed patience. And I want to say, that was great wisdom on her part. She's going to continue to do her part. But she's willing to wait for God to do what she can. And by the way, God is going to do so in a big way. If she had asked this day, it would have been the wrong time. Because what God is going to do that night and that next day is going to change the whole situation around. And if she had not waited on God, it would have been a terrible mistake. I think that it would have turned out completely different. So we see the patience. We see, thirdly, the promise. She knew, though, that she couldn't wait forever. So look at what she promised in verse number 8. She wants the king and Haman to come back tomorrow for another banquet that she'll prepare for them. And notice what she says, I will do tomorrow as the king had said. She says, I promise you, king, tomorrow I'll ask you what I really want to ask you. Because she knows she can't wait forever. To drag this out another day, the king is going to go from being intrigued by her request to being irritated by her request. At tomorrow's banquet, she promised that she would reveal her true request and her purpose behind her appearance at his throne. By the way, she's putting trust in God, but she's also kind of putting God to task. God, now, if you're going to do something, you got to do it now. I've told the king that tomorrow I'm going to tell what I want. So God, if you're ever going to do something, you got to do it, and you got to do it now. The prudence in all this is, as intrigued as the king is already, by her promising tomorrow, you come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow, king, and I'll tell you what I really want. Can you imagine the anticipation that built? He's already intrigued. He's already wondering what she's up to and what she wants. But she just built a whole level of anticipation in this thing. The king is going to be walking around all the next day wondering, I wonder what she's going to ask me. I can't imagine what she's going to ask me. What in the world does Esther want? Esther has got his attention. Setting a timeline on her reveal is going to only heighten that intrigue. Fourthly, we see the providence in the petition. What nobody knew, what no one knew, was what God had in store over the next 24 hours. Esther didn't know it. The king didn't know it. Haman certainly didn't know it. Not even Mordecai knew it. But God was going to be very, very busy over the next several hours working His hand of providence to turn this situation completely around. Proverbs 27:1 says this. We read this Sunday night. Boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth. You know, we quoted that verse on Sunday. Obviously, it is written in a negative connotation because it's about boasting. But there's a principle here that we can put a positive spin on. Yes, negatively. We shouldn't be arrogant or boastful about tomorrow because we don't know what one day will bring forth. Tomorrow, terrible things could happen in any of our lives that completely disrupt it and change the course of our entire life. And we don't know it. But could I say this? That same principle works the other way. You could be battling a storm today. You could be in a deep, dark dungeon, a pit of despair. But who knoweth what a day may bring forth? Just as you don't know what a day may bring forth negatively, you don't know what a day may bring forth positively either. That, my friends, is called hope. That's not boasting. That's hope. God, I'm hurting right now. God, I'm in the midst of the storm of my life right now. But who knoweth what a day may bring forth? Ask Joseph. In one day, he went from a prisoner to the palace. In one day. He went from a slave, a servant, to a ruler. He went from being one of the least people in all of Egypt to the second in command only to Pharaoh in one day. Who knoweth what one day may bring forth? God can do amazing things in just one day. God is going to do that here in this situation. He's going to do some wonderful things in the next 24 hours that is going to greatly assist Esther when she finally makes her request to the king, though she or no one else at the moment knows it. Esther was following great prudence in her petition for the king to come to a second party. Now, the rest of our chapter deals with the perspective of the other person involved in this that we haven't heard really anything from in this chapter. That's Haman. So far, we haven't gained any insight into the thinking or the mindset of Haman. But the rest of the chapter is going to reveal that to us. Scripture is going to pull back the curtain and show us things from Haman's perspective. So notice the perspective in the petition. So what is Haman's perspective to all this? Well, we see the pleasure in the perspective. Look at verse number 9. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. Haman leaves that party puffed up like a peacock. He is strutting his stuff. He thinks he is big stuff. He has probably got a smile that is 50 miles wide. How special am I? How important am I? Esther, the queen, had a party and didn't want anybody there but the king and me. Now, what do you think about that? I can just see that Cheshire cat grin on Haman's face as he walked that party. If he was younger, he'd have been skipping as he walked. He was just eat up with pride and so happy and glad. His gladness was built on ignorance, though. He was not invited to the party because he was so special. He was invited to the party because he was so sinful. He wasn't invited to Esther's party because he was honorable. He was invited to her party because he was horrible. But he was blinded by his own pride that he couldn't see the true intent. He thought he was so special that the queen wanted not just the king, but him invited to the party. I want to tell you, folks, pride is a great deceiver. We can immediately see that pride in the last half of this verse. That is the perturbance in the perspective. All that glee, all that happiness immediately dissipated. Because as Haman is leaving the palace and he's going through the gate, lo and behold, who's there? Mordecai. And all the other keepers of the gate, they fall down and they bow down before Haman and they are trembling with fear. Mordecai just sits there. And boy, it gets under Haman's saddle. He is really upset. Look at what the Bible says there. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. That phrase, nor moved for him, it means to tremble. It means that he had no fear of this man. As powerful as he was, Mordecai wasn't afraid of him. Mordecai didn't respect him. And Mordecai didn't fear him. And that really bothered Haman. He knew Mordecai was no fool. He knew where this decree had come from. It had not come from the king. It had come from the heart of Haman. Haman was not honorable before the decree. He wouldn't honor him before it. He's certainly not going to honor him now. Truly, the pleasures of sin last for just a season, because the pleasure of Haman's sin lasted from Esther's chamber to the gate of the king, and it was over. Haman was a petulant man who demanded that everybody bow and fear him. And one person's refusal was enough to send him into a revengeful rage to destroy a whole group of people. From Scripture, it seems as if Mordecai was ready to grab hold if Haman was ready to grab Mordecai right then and there and execute him. Look at what it says. It says, nor moved for him, and he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself. When he saw Mordecai, his blood just boiled. His face, no doubt, got red. His smile immediately went away, and he wanted to go over there and grab a hold of him and kill him right then. He didn't want to wait 11 months. He wanted him dead, and he wanted him dead then. But he refrained himself, thankfully, because God's going to do something. Notice the pride in the perspective, verses 10 through 12. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and of the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther, the queen, did let no man come into the king, and come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Pride attempting to put aside his perturbance about Mordecai, Haman gathers together his family and his friends. He wants to gloat. He wants to glory. His report is dripping with his pride. He's prideful about three things here. I didn't have this in your notes, but you may want to add them, you may not. He is prideful about his fortune. He said, look how much money I got. Look how much wealth I have. 24 hours, that wealth is going to do him no good. When death comes knocking at your door, I don't care how much money you have, it's not going to do you any good. He was prideful and glorying and resting and trusting in his wealth. He thought he could buy anybody. He had bought the king, he thought. 24 hours. He's going to find out. There are some things money can't buy. Money can't buy peace. Money can't buy joy. Money can't buy prosperity, real prosperity and health. And money can't stop death. He was prideful in his fortune. He was prideful in his family. It's interesting, the Greek historian Herodotus tells us that in the Persian Empire, next to military prowess, accomplishments on the military field, there was no greater proof of manly excellence in Persia than to be the father of many sons. A man that had many sons was thought to be a man's man. Oh, what a man. Had a lot of children by a lot of probably different women. And Haman had a big family. He had a lot of children. That puffed him up with pride. Everybody thought, man, what a man. What a man. Herodotus records that the king of Persia would annually send presents to the man who had the greatest number of sons. So the man in his empire that had the most children, the most sons, the king would reward him every year. Again, pride in family is all about the change. And change quickly. That family that Haman's proud of, they're going to die with him. What a sad thing. He doesn't realize that family that he's taken pride in, he's just doomed them. See, none of us live to ourselves. What we do and the sin that we commit, it affects our family most of all. Haman's transgression is going to affect his family. He took pride not just in his fortune, not just in his family, but he took pride in his fame. He said, I'm big stuff. Have I told you how the king has promoted me? Have I told you? I'm sure they've all heard it before. How the king has made me second in the kingdom. That there is nobody in this kingdom that has more power and more authority than me except for the king. Have I told you that in the last 5 minutes? Because I'm sure he was the type that reminded everybody every 5 minutes. He talked of his great promotion. He talked about his great position. He talked about his great privilege. He was the number 2 guy in the government only to the king. But fame is what ruined Haman. Power had corrupted him. And that fame is all going to go away in less than a day. He's going to go from famous to infamous. You know what the difference is? It's not 2 letters. Famous means admired, respected. Infamous means despised and hated. Haman is going to go from famous to infamous in just about a day. The clock was ticking, the countdown to his destruction was on. He thought the Jews were under the countdown clock, but it was he himself. Yet all that fortune, family, and fame, isn't amazing. With all that fortune and family and fame, Haman was still not happy. He had seemingly everything that a man could wish, but his pride was so destructive that even if a man has the whole world, a small little thing can rob him of his happiness. Notice the petulance in the perspective. Look at verse number 13. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. I've got all this fortune. I've got this huge family. I'm the most famous man in the world other than my king. And yet, all he can focus on is Mordecai. What a petty, petulant thing to say. You know, this man, Haman, like many, ignores all that he has and focuses and is fixated on the one thing he doesn't have. Isn't it strange how we're like that sometimes? God can bless us with so many things. He can bless us in so many ways. But we focus on the things that we don't have instead of the things we do have. It's shameful for us to be that way. Adam and Eve were that way. They were in a beautiful place. Paradise. A garden filled with trees of all kinds of fruits, and that in abundance. And all of it was theirs. But Satan got them to focus on the one thing that they couldn't have instead of focusing on all that God had provided for them to have. He'll do the same for you. David, he already had a harem. He already had beautiful women he was married to. But he was focused on the one woman he couldn't have instead of all the women he already had. Shameful. Ahab, he already had vineyards, several of them. But he was focused on the one vineyard he didn't have instead of all the vineyards he already had. It's petulant. It's prideful. It's discontentment. And so often we're guilty of it too. Lastly, we see the proposition in the perspective. Then said Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. How'd you like to be that carpenter? Had to get up in the middle of the night to start this project. The proposal to build these gallows did not come from Haman. It came from his wife and his friends. Folks, this is a great lesson to us to be careful about who we surround ourselves with. Who we choose as our friends. And especially who we choose as our spouse. This man was already a wicked man, but he married a wicked woman who casually and callously and coldly suggested, well, why don't you just go ahead and have him killed so you can have a good time at the party? How cold is that? So careless with human life to suggest, just go on and get him killed where you can enjoy yourself. What disregard for life. His friends were no better. Good friends tell us what we need to hear, not what we want to hear. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Now I'm going to close with this. The gallows mentioned here are not what we think of as gallows. When we hear that term, we think of a structure where ropes are tied and men are hung by the neck by rope. That's not what this means. If you've ever seen any movies about ancient times and ancient warfares, you often see when enemies are killed, they are impaled with a pole that is sharpened on one end and driven right through their center, and then put in the ground and hung up so that anybody coming into that town or anybody coming along them will know who's the victor and who has been destroyed. That's the gallows that he's building. He's going to build a pole that he's going to drive right through the middle of Mordecai's chest. And then he's going to put that pole in the ground and hang him up so that everybody can see what happens when you disrespect Haman. The height of this was going to be 75 feet high. He wanted to make sure everybody could see it. It was probably going to be one of the tallest structures around. It's the same word, by the way, that you find in chapter 2, verse number 23, with those two men that tried to kill the king, and Mordecai discovered that. They were killed in the same manner. These gallows would not use a rope and hang a person by the neck, but it was really kind of a forerunner to the Roman cross. The Romans stopped throwing men on top of that spike or driving that spike through them, but instead attached a crossbar to it and began nailing them to that tree, to that pole. The reason for this proposition is even more wicked. Do it so Haman could enjoy himself at the party. How cold and callous human beings can be. So Haman went to bed that night happy. Tomorrow, he's going to go to the king first thing in the morning. And he's going to ask to be able, permission to be able to execute Mordecai. That way he can have a good time at the party. You know? Kill a few people. Kill the person who's aggravating you, and you can go have a good time and not feel any guilt about it. Little does he know what's going to happen overnight. It's going to change everything. By the time he gets to the king in the morning, oh boy, you just wait. If you haven't read ahead, you just wait. Oh my, how things are going to change. Big time. Little does he know that when he goes to ask for the king for Mordecai's life, the king has a different plan in mind for Mordecai. And Haman's not going to like it at all. Little does he know what's going to happen in that second party at Esther's. In 1588, King Philip II of Spain sent the most powerful naval forces on the planet to fight against England and bring the English monarch and the people back under the control and power and influence of the Catholic Pope. Queen Elizabeth I was queen at that time. Her father, Henry VIII, had broken away from the Catholic Church, not for religious reasons, but for sinful reasons, but regardless, and it allowed religious freedom to spring up in England, and Philip was determined to stamp that out and bring England back under the control of Catholicism. So he sent his Spanish Armada to defeat the fledgling navy of the British and invade Britain and bring them back under Catholicism. It certainly looked like England was doomed. Their navy was absolutely no match for the great Spanish Armada. When those mighty ships of Spain entered into the English Channel, all of a sudden a great storm arose and drove those great sailing vessels right into the rocks that line the southeastern shore of England. The Spanish Armada was destroyed by those rocks, not by the ships of England. They were destroyed by war, not by war, but by winds and waves. When news got back to Spain about what had happened, and Philip heard the news, he said this, I sent my ships to fight against England, not against the winds and the waves of God. So it is with every person, monarch or nation, that goes against the providence of God. Haman was about to run headlong into God's providence. And he was going to find out what anybody else has ever found out. God always wins. And men always lose. Our world today, I believe, folks, is on a collision course with God's providence. I'm glad tonight I'm on the winning side. It may look bleak at times for Christians. It may look dark. But we're on the winning side. Just give it a little time. Sometimes it doesn't take very long at all. Only 24 hours. And God can change things completely around. Brother June closes us in prayer tonight.